On 1944, 6 weeks after the beaches were secured, Normandy had transformed from triumph into confinement, victory hardened into stalemate beneath hedgerows older than nations. The Allied invasion had succeeded, yet momentum vanished inside a maze of sunken lanes. Earthen walls and fields turned into fortresses, where every advance cost blood far beyond expectation. Lieutenant General Omar Bradley studied casualty lists growing longer each morning, numbers reflecting human exhaustion rather than tactical failure. American divisions fought continuously, yet progress measured itself in yards, not miles, as infantry learned that visibility vanished beyond hedges, and German defenders exploited every fold of terrain with lethal patience. The optimism of June faded beneath July heat, replaced by frustration seeping through command tents and foxholes alike. Soldiers who survived Omaha now faced a slower death by attrition, advancing into concealed fire where mortar, machine guns, and unseen riflemen dominated the narrow approaches between ancient Norman fields. Each hedgerow became a battle, each field a miniature campaign, requiring coordination that terrain denied and time that casualties consumed. Tanks could not maneuver freely, artillery struggled to observe targets, and air power lost effectiveness beneath green canopies, turning America's advantages into burdens rather than decisive tools. German forces adapted expertly, converting the countryside into a defensive lattice designed for delay and destruction. They mined approaches, pre-registered artillery, and used reverse slopes invisible to attackers, forcing American units into frontal assaults where bravery compensated for intelligence gaps created by terrain and inexperience. The human cost mounted relentlessly. Companies shrank to platoons while replacements arrived unfamiliar with combat realities. Officers rotated through commands under pressure, learning leadership inside killing zones where hesitation meant death, and aggression invited ambush, creating an environment that punished even correct decisions with disproportionate losses. Bradley understood the strategic imbalance forming across the front, because while Americans bled west of Caen, German armor remained largely absent. Panzer divisions were not counterattacking the beaches, not striking the vulnerable lodgements, instead massing elsewhere, responding to pressures beyond the American sector entirely. This imbalance haunted Allied coordination, revealing that Normandy was not a unified battle but interlocking struggles shaped by command decisions and delayed objectives. What failed to break open in the east compressed everything in the west, concentrating American suffering inside terrain never intended for modern mechanized warfare. Reports from forward units described exhaustion bordering on collapse, men sleeping in wet ditches between assaults, nerves frayed by constant shelling. The psychological toll deepened as soldiers realized survival depended less on skill than chance, undermining confidence and breeding quiet resentment toward distant strategic promises. The invasion had succeeded tactically, yet operational freedom remained elusive, turning success into a trap built from geography and misaligned expectations. Normandy refused to open, refusing movement, refusing resolution, and transforming Allied superiority into a grinding test of endurance rather than decisive maneuver warfare. Within this crucible, pressure grew for a solution that could restore momentum and justify sacrifice. Commanders searched for methods to shatter the stalemate, knowing continued attrition risked hollowing combat power before any breakout occurred, and that time favored defenders entrenched within Normandy's unforgiving terrain. 6 weeks after liberation began, the campaign stood balanced between persistence and disaster. Victory depended on change rather than perseverance alone. Normandy had swallowed speed, consumed initiative, and demanded adaptation, forcing Allied leadership to confront whether existing plans could survive the realities revealed by relentless combat. On the eve of invasion, Bernard Montgomery's confidence framed Allied expectations, his assurances delivered with absolute certainty to Eisenhower and planners alike. Caen would fall on D-Day, he promised, opening plains ideal for armor and enabling swift exploitation before German reserves could react effectively. Caen mattered beyond symbolism, because its road network controlled movement across eastern Normandy toward Paris. Capturing it quickly would deny Germans maneuver space, prevent armored concentration, and allow Allied forces to transition from fragile lodgment to mobile warfare within hours of landing. Montgomery's gamble rested on timing rather than audacity, prioritizing methodical buildup over reckless advance. He believed German reactions could be shaped predictably. That disciplined tempo would neutralize counterattacks. and that British forces could absorb initial friction without surrendering the decisive initiative promised by early success. D-Day plans placed British and Canadian troops on Sword, Juno, and Gold Beaches, their inland thrusts converging toward Caen. The landings succeeded tactically, casualties lower than feared, beaches secured quickly, seemingly validating Montgomery's belief that preparation and control could tame chaos. Yet the promise required momentum, not consolidation, and here the gamble revealed its risk. British units paused to reorganize, awaiting artillery, supplies, and coordination, valuing order over speed, while German commanders exploited every hour to react, reposition, and stiffen defenses before Caen's approaches. The terrain favored movement initially, open fields replacing hedgerows, inviting rapid advance. But delay surrendered advantage, allowing the 21st Panzer Division to counterattack by afternoon, disrupting progress and signaling that German armor was already contesting ground Montgomery had expected to seize uncontested. By nightfall, Caen remained untouched, the promise already broken, though explanations softened the failure. Montgomery assured Eisenhower the delay was temporary, insisting that pressure would resume next morning and that the city would fall within days, not hours, as originally pledged. Days passed, optimism eroded, and German resistance hardened into organized defense. Each renewed British assault met prepared positions, supported by reinforcements drawn deliberately toward Caen, because Montgomery's repeated attacks advertised intent clearly, inviting German commanders to concentrate strength where Allies expected breakthrough. What Montgomery later framed as deliberate fixation was, at the time, an unplanned stalemate. He sought Caen persistently, believing persistence would prevail, yet every failed attempt deepened commitment, tying British forces into attritional battle while denying flexibility across the broader Normandy front. This fixation carried strategic consequences because German armor massed opposite Caen could not be elsewhere. While unintended, it shaped the campaign's geometry, pulling panzers eastward and sparing American beaches from armored counterstroke, even as British troops paid heavily for ground never fully secured. For American commanders, the promise at Caen transformed into a burden, because Montgomery's stalled gamble redirected German strength westward indirectly. The longer Caen held, the more Americans faced infantry-heavy resistance elsewhere, absorbing casualties meant to be avoided by rapid Allied expansion. Montgomery's D-Day gamble thus defined Normandy's opening phase, not through triumph but through delay. His promise created expectations that reality dismantled, setting conditions where Allied success depended less on planned precision and more on adaptive responses to consequences no one had intended. June 6 dawned with momentum promised, yet momentum stalled as commanders chose caution, preferring consolidation over pursuit despite shattered German defenses and unexpectedly light resistance inland ahead. This pause reshaped the day, turning opportunity into delay, allowing German officers precious hours to regroup, move armor, and seal corridors that should have remained dangerously open. British formations advanced competently from beaches, but halted repeatedly to align artillery and supply columns, a methodical rhythm that valued certainty above the fleeting advantage of surprise. German reactions accelerated accordingly, commanders exploiting every lull, inserting mobile reserves and reconnaissance screens that thickened resistance long before Allied planners anticipated meaningful opposition, forming barriers rapidly. Montgomery's preference for order reflected experience, believing control reduced casualties, yet the choice traded speed for structure, surrendering initiative during hours when German command remained fragile. Across narrow roads, halted units waited for permissions and plans, while battlefield conditions shifted invisibly, a reminder that modern war punishes hesitation as ruthlessly as recklessness. The choice to consolidate beachheads felt prudent, ensuring logistics flowed smoothly, yet it misread German resilience, underestimating how quickly defenders could transform scattered survivors into cohesive blocking forces. Time favored the defender, especially when attackers paused, because each hour enabled mines laid, guns emplaced, and command relationships restored across threatened sectors methodically and deliberately. Operational caution also reflected political expectations. British leadership sought a clean narrative, fearing early losses might overshadow success even when success depended on relentless forward motion, yet war punished narratives, not intentions, and the battlefield rewarded only tempo, seizing windows that closed permanently once defenders recovered coherence and confidence and operational control. June 6 therefore fractured into moments lost, not through defeat, but through delay. As Allied columns slowed beneath self-imposed restraints designed for safety rather than decisive exploitation, German commanders sensed reprieve, using nightfall to reposition armor toward Caen, converting a tenuous situation into a defensible line by morning through coordinated movements and discipline. The sacrifice of speed reverberated westward, because German armor fixed near Caen remained unavailable elsewhere, shaping an uneven struggle that spared beaches but punished infantry inland. This unintended effect masked failure, allowing claims of design later, though contemporaries recognized desperation rather than orchestration behind repeated assaults and costly persistence endured by troops. American observers watched with concern, understanding that stalled British progress invited German focus, increasing pressure across sectors already constrained by terrain and limited maneuver space conditions severely. Speed mattered most at invasion's edge, where audacity could unravel defenses, yet audacity surrendered ground to meticulous caution during critical early hours, costing lives unnecessarily then. Every halted column represented a choice, trading immediate risk for delayed certainty. But certainty proved illusory once the enemy recovered equilibrium and operational initiative vanished quickly. Historians later parsed intentions, yet soldiers felt consequences directly, advancing into stronger positions forged during pauses they could not influence despite courage, endurance, and orders obeyed. Caution's cost emerged gradually, measured in days rather than hours. As German defenses thickened and Allied flexibility narrowed across Normandy's contested approaches, complicating subsequent operations severely. What might have been fluid exploitation hardened into attrition, a transformation rooted in June 6 decisions that prioritized order above momentum during critical opening phases only. Commanders learned painfully that invasion windows close fast, and that preparation cannot substitute for relentless forward pressure when opportunity appears, fleetingly and unforgivingly in combat environments. June 6 thus stands as warning. Victory requires daring synchronized with readiness, not caution untempered by urgency during decisive openings created by surprise and shock alone. Speed once sacrificed proved impossible to reclaim fully, because the enemy adapted faster than planners revised intentions amid shifting fronts, communications and constraints everywhere rapidly emerging. From that day, Normandy demanded blood for yards, a price traceable to choices made while beaches were still fresh behind advancing boots and expectations lingered unfulfilled. German headquarters assessed the battlefield pragmatically, noting British pressure near. Caen signaled the primary Allied thrust requiring armored concentration urgently. Field Marshal Rommel understood terrain favored tanks eastward, while western hedgerows limited maneuver, making British sectors the decisive arena demanding reinforcement despite broader invasion frontage. Panzer divisions were precious instruments, held back for decisive counterblows. Yet British stagnation paradoxically clarified German priorities through persistent visible intent, repeated assaults toward. Caen confirmed Montgomery's fixation, convincing German planners that holding this ground mattered more than dispersing armor against fragmented American advances elsewhere. As British attacks intensified without breakthrough, German confidence grew that Allied intentions were predictable, allowing calculated concentration rather than reactive dispersion. 7 panzer divisions gravitated toward Caen, not by deception, but because British failure created a magnet drawing German strength relentlessly eastward. This concentration reshaped German strategy profoundly, trading flexibility for solidity, as commanders committed elite units to grind down British assaults methodically. American sectors consequently appeared secondary, their bocage battles seen as containment rather than existential threat demanding armored intervention immediately. The decision spared American beaches catastrophic counterattacks, yet condemned American infantry to brutal attrition against experienced German foot soldiers entrenched expertly. Panzer commanders trusted that hedgerows neutralized Allied armor westward, allowing tanks to remain near Caen where open ground preserved their striking value. British failure therefore created an unintended shield, absorbing German armor through visible persistence rather than successful maneuver or deception. Montgomery would later claim deliberate fixation, yet contemporary German records reveal reaction to stalled British advances, not recognition of masterful strategic bait. Each British assault reinforced German assumptions, confirming that the decisive battle lay east, even as casualties mounted without decisive Allied progress. This mutual fixation locked both sides into attritional struggle, consuming resources while delaying the Allied breakout essential for campaign success. German operational thinking hardened accordingly, prioritizing holding Caen at all costs, believing its loss meant operational collapse across northern France. Thus, armored reserves poured into a battle of endurance rather than mobility, a choice driven by Allied hesitation rather than enemy brilliance. American commanders recognized the irony bitterly, understanding British stagnation saved beaches but doomed inland infantry to relentless close combat. German panzer absence westward did not mean weakness, because infantry, mines, and terrain proved lethal substitutes in constricted Norman fields. Strategic consequences rippled outward, as German armor immobilized near Caen became unavailable for flexible counteroffensives elsewhere. Yet, this immobility suited German defensive aims because Allied caution surrendered initiative, allowing methodical attrition rather than catastrophic collapse. British failure thus reshaped German strategy unintentionally, drawing strength into a grinding battle that delayed Allied liberation while preserving German coherence. What emerged was not Allied design, but enemy adaptation to visible hesitation, transforming Normandy into prolonged ordeal rather than swift liberation campaign. American infantry entered the Norman bocage believing momentum still favored the invasion. Yet every field became a killing zone shaped by centuries of agriculture and warlike adaptation. German defenders exploited hedgerows as natural fortifications, turning yards into lethal distances where visibility vanished and fear dominated movement forward relentlessly under fire. Sunken lanes funneled platoons into predictable paths where machine guns overlapped fires and mortar fell unseen. Tanks hesitated behind earthen banks, exposing bellies when climbing, dying to concealed anti-tank weapons as infantry bled without armored relief. Learning terrain nullified doctrine brutally. Every hour endured longer than commanders expected initially ashore. American companies attacked fields measured in yards, suffering losses counted in dozens, for objectives invisible beyond vegetation. German infantry rotated calmly, using rehearsed drills perfected on eastern fronts, exploiting American inexperience mercilessly while replacements arrived untrained, frightened, and consumed by lessons written immediately in blood-soaked soil beneath Normandy's summer sun. Commanders watched casualty boards climb daily, numbers masking human collapse spreading through rifle squads. Air power mattered little beneath hedges, artillery struggled to identify targets, and progress became arithmetic, trading lives for meters gained. A grim economy imposed because maneuver space promised east remained locked behind Caen's failure stubbornly unresolved. German snipers listened patiently, firing once then disappearing through tunnels cut into banks. Night brought no relief, as patrols probed, mines exploded, and exhaustion dulled judgment. American soldiers slept beside hedges, knowing dawn meant crossing open ground again, praying artillery would lift before machine guns resumed their precise harvesting of lives. The hedgerow slaughter eroded confidence faster than any German counterattack, because it felt endless, purposeless, and indifferent. Men stopped asking why objectives mattered, focusing instead on survival, while officers struggled to inspire movement across terrain that punished courage as harshly as hesitation, draining morale into quiet fatalism shared silently between foxholes. Medical units overflowed, evacuation routes jammed, and replacements stepped into positions still warm from fallen predecessors. Letters home softened truths, while rumors hardened despair. The bocage consumed divisions piecemeal, denying Americans any sense of decisive battle. Only cumulative suffering endured while waiting for conditions elsewhere to finally change their fate. Bradley understood the strategic imbalance, recognizing German armor remained absent, yet Americans still bled. Montgomery's stalled battle east bought time, but Americans paid interest daily. Each hedgerow cleared represented sacrifice, subsidizing another commander's unkept promise, breeding resentment that would later shape intra-league bitterness remembered long after Normandy ended officially liberated. Innovation emerged from desperation as engineers welded steel teeth onto Sherman tanks. These crude devices allowed breaches, restoring some momentum, yet adaptation lagged losses. Every advance remained costly, because German infantry adapted quickly, reinforcing that technology alone could not erase weeks of accumulated disadvantage created by stalled plans elsewhere earlier. Psychological scars deepened, shaping American attitudes toward Allied leadership. Soldiers sensed they were fighting consequences, not intentions, bearing burdens imposed by distant decisions. Trust frayed, replaced by grim professionalism that pushed units forward regardless, accepting losses as unavoidable tolls exacted before others corrected strategic errors never admitted publicly during battle. Yet endurance hardened the army, forcing tactical learning under fire. Small unit leadership improved, coordination sharpened, and adaptability grew precisely because survival demanded it. The hedgerow slaughter forged veterans, though at horrific cost, preparing forces for breakout once space finally opened, transforming suffering into capability purchased dearly by thousands fallen. America paid the price in Normandy, not for defeat, but for delay. Blood-soaked fields that might have been bypassed, had promises been kept. The hedgerows became monuments to misalignment between strategy and execution, where infantry sacrificed themselves patiently until others learned speed mattered more than caution in modern war. Operation Epsom opened with thunder, artillery saturating fields west of Caen while British infantry advanced believing weight alone ensured rupture. Guns fired thousands of rounds, smoke obscured valleys, and planners expected German defenses to collapse under sheer pressure. Instead, resistance stiffened, revealing firepower could punish, yet not dislodge, a prepared enemy entrenched deeply. British divisions crossed the Odin River under intense shelling, gaining ground measured carefully, yet every mile exposed flanks to counterattack. German commanders fed armor piecemeal, using panthers and tigers surgically, striking exposed spearheads. Progress demanded constant reinforcement, transforming breakthrough ambitions into sustained attritional combat neither side had originally desired. Montgomery committed reserves methodically, believing persistence would grind defenses down. Artillery fired again, air support roared overhead, and infantry pressed forward repeatedly. German units absorbed punishment, yielding ground deliberately, trading space for time. Attrition became reciprocal, but strategic effect remained limited, as no decisive rupture materialized despite mounting casualties. German counterattacks struck hardest where success seemed closest, exploiting British pauses required for consolidation. Tanks emerged from tree lines, smashing bridging efforts and isolating battalions. Each local gain demanded disproportionate defense, draining momentum. The battlefield became fluid yet inconclusive, reinforcing that massed firepower alone could not substitute maneuver against adaptive opponents. For American observers, Epsom confirmed grim suspicions. While British forces wrestled armor, Germans still retained freedom elsewhere. Attrition consumed strength without yielding Caen, prolonging stalemate. Every British attack fixed panzers temporarily, yet never decisively, ensuring American forces continued fighting unsupported infantry battles in the West while awaiting decisive change. Logistics strained under constant consumption. Ammunition expended faster than planned. Replacements rushed forward incomplete. Commanders recalculated objectives repeatedly, shrinking ambitions as realities asserted themselves. Epsom shifted from bold envelopment to survival under pressure. Its original promise diluted into incremental gains purchased dearly by battalions exhausted beyond expectation. German discipline impressed even adversaries, units withdrawing under fire, counterattacking precisely, preserving cohesion. Their doctrine accepted losses strategically, prioritizing delay over ground. British planners recognized brilliance opposing them, yet struggled to counter it within constraints self-imposed by cautious sequencing and rigid adherence to prepared timelines now overtaken by chaos. Weather compounded difficulty, rain swelling rivers, turning fields into mud that slowed armor. Bridging units labored under fire, often losing structures hours after completion. Each obstacle magnified German defensive economy, forcing attackers to spend resources repeatedly for fleeting advantage, reinforcing attrition's cruel arithmetic without decisive return. Casualty lists lengthened quietly, morale held through professionalism rather than optimism. Soldiers fought because orders demanded it, not because victory felt near. Epsom demonstrated bravery unmistakably, yet bravery alone could not transform attritional pressure into operational collapse, exposing limits of set-piece offensives against resilient, mobile defenders. American losses indirectly mounted as consequences echoed westward. German armor remained engaged, yet not destroyed, allowing continued pressure elsewhere. Epsom's failure to break through prolonged overall suffering, reinforcing perception that British caution and method limited alliance effectiveness, feeding tensions that commanders later struggled to suppress behind diplomatic language. Ultimately, Epsom achieved strategic containment, not liberation. It fixed German strength, bought time but at terrible cost and without decisive success. Firepower inflicted damage, yet failed to purchase freedom of maneuver. Proving modern war demanded integration of speed, surprise, and audacity beyond carefully metered destruction alone. The lesson lingered, shaping subsequent operations. Attrition without breakthrough bled armies white, regardless of preparation. Epsom became warning and prelude, demonstrating that Normandy required something different, something bolder, a shift that would come only when patience finally gave way to decisive exploitation elsewhere on the front. As July wore on, Montgomery reshaped the story, presenting delay at Caen as deliberate strategic containment doctrine retrospectively. Briefings emphasized intention, arguing German armor had been fixed intentionally, protecting American forces elsewhere across the wider front. Failure became foresight through language, smoothing hard facts into reassuring explanations for superiors under mounting political and coalition pressure. This narrative emerged quietly, not during battle, but afterward. When results demanded justification from skeptical allies and publics, Montgomery framed persistence as control, insisting every German counterattack validated his original concept of operational patience and economy. The explanation spread upward, accepted reluctantly by Eisenhower seeking unity over confrontation within an increasingly strained alliance command. Maps were redrawn rhetorically, arrows becoming magnets, delays transforming into purposeful gravity wells within official briefings and memoirs. Critics noted timing, since claims appeared only after Caen resisted repeated assaults by exhausted divisions across June-July. Earlier orders and communications showed urgency, not patience, contradicting retrospective serenity presented later to historians, journalists, and politicians. American commanders listened carefully, weighing political necessity against battlefield experience earned painfully by infantry divisions trapped westward. Still, Bradley remained unconvinced, privately noting his casualties did not feel like intentional shielding during relentless hedgerow fighting months. Yet public dissent threatened cohesion, so objections stayed confined to diaries and guarded conversations among senior American officers. Montgomery's authority, prestige from earlier victories, insulated his interpretation from immediate challenge within. Allied councils hungry for stability. British media echoed confidence, portraying steadfast leadership holding enemy strength firmly before eventual liberation narratives could unfold publicly. Thus repetition hardened perspective, until explanation resembled doctrine rather than defense against mounting evidence of miscalculation and delay. Operational reports selectively emphasized German losses, underplaying Allied expenditure of lives and time during inconclusive engagements. Near Caen. Statistics became tools, arranged to support narrative cohesion rather than full transparency for political audiences. Across nations involved. In war councils, language softened reality, converting stalemate into patient mastery within alliance planning frameworks increasingly sensitive diplomatically. This reframing served alliance survival, even as it obscured accountability for missed opportunities during critical early Normandy weeks. Eisenhower tolerated ambiguity, prioritizing cooperation over assigning blame publicly while privately absorbing competing assessments from Bradley and others. Unity mattered strategically, yet truth suffered gradual erosion as narratives replaced frank operational evaluation during continuing campaigns across France. Montgomery's memoirs later crystallized this version, cementing intent as historical fact within popular memory, academic debate, and controversy. Readers encountered certainty, not doubt, confident explanations smoothing wartime complexity for post-war audiences seeking coherence rather than discomfort. Thus interpretation traveled forward, shaping reputations for generations of commanders whose decisions remained contested among scholars, soldiers, and publics. Historians later dissected records, finding intention less clear than claimed within contemporaneous orders, messages, and operational planning documents. The gap between plan and portrayal widened under scrutiny as archival access revealed urgency, improvisation, and reactive decision-making. Narrative convenience stood exposed, though motives remained understandable amid coalition politics, personal pride, and pressure for success narratives. Montgomery was neither villain nor savior, but a commander navigating immense pressure from expectations, promises, and battlefield uncertainty. His reframing reflected survival instincts within alliance command structures where public discord risked strategic collapse beyond Normandy alone, yet consequences remained real for those who fought and died while explanations evolved above them in headquarters far away. Soldiers experienced reality without narrative buffer, measuring success and survival amid hedgerows artillery exhaustion, fear, and confusion daily. Strategic. Stories offered little comfort in foxholes where orders arrived detached from promised design or intentional sacrifice. Rhetoric. Thus distance grew between explanation and experience, shaping lasting skepticism among veterans, recalling Normandy with bitterness, restraint, and resolve. Section 7 reveals how power reshapes memory during war as commanders justify outcomes, preserve authority, and maintain alliance cohesion. Montgomery's narrative succeeded politically, if not completely historically, satisfying immediate needs while leaving enduring debate among scholars, soldiers alike. The cost of such rewriting lingered quietly within post-war assessments, where truth and unity remained permanently entangled after Normandy. Bradley studied the front with growing unease, recognizing his First Army lacked space to breathe or maneuver. The bocage confined movement, neutralizing doctrine built on flexibility and firepower. Each advance cost lives without yielding operational freedom, turning tactical gains into exhausting stalemates that bled units wide across Normandy's summer battles. Reports arrived hourly, casualty figures climbing while objectives remained frustratingly small and temporary. Bradley understood attrition favored Germany in such terrain, despite Allied material superiority. Without breakthrough elsewhere, his army absorbed punishment meant to be shared, fighting an enemy able to choose ground and tempo relentlessly throughout July campaigns alone. Divisions rotated reluctantly, veterans thinning as replacements arrived inexperienced and unprepared for hedgerow warfare. Training manuals offered little guidance for earthen walls and hidden guns. Bradley felt responsible for lives spent learning by death. Knowing maneuver denied them chances doctrine promised during Normandy's summer battles of attrition alone, painfully endured. Communications with Eisenhower were careful, balancing honesty with alliance politics and strategic patience. Bradley avoided overt blame yet emphasized consequences of stagnation eastward. Every stalled British attack translated west into German resilience, forcing Americans to pay for immobility they could neither influence nor escape during prolonged Normandy ground fighting phases. Maps showed microscopic progress, villages changing hands repeatedly under artillery smoke and rubble. Bradley questioned strategy that sacrificed momentum for containment narratives. Maneuver warfare required open terrain and speed, yet his formations crawled yard by yard, hemorrhaging strength, while the calendar advanced mercilessly toward critical breakout deadlines set earlier by planners. Soldiers wrote home describing invisible enemies and suffocating fear, letters Bradley sometimes read firsthand. Their words cut deeper than reports, revealing morale stretched thin by purposeless slaughter. Leadership meant absorbing that weight silently, translating anguish into requests for solutions higher command hesitated to deliver amid Normandy hedgerow fighting conditions daily. Bradley's doctrine emphasized exploitation after penetration, yet penetration never came within bocage labyrinths. Engineers improvised hedgerow cutters, adapting tanks desperately. Innovation helped tactically, but without operational freedom gains remained localized, insufficient to alter strategic balance or relieve pressure consuming infantry relentlessly across prolonged Normandy's summer engagements of attrition warfare alone. He recognized time itself was becoming an enemy, eroding divisions faster than replacements could restore effectiveness. Patience preached elsewhere translated here into paralysis. Bradley feared that by the time opportunity arrived, his army might lack strength to exploit it decisively after weeks of costly Normandy ground combat conditions persisted unchecked. Meetings with corps commanders revealed exhaustion masked by discipline and duty. Requests centered on space, not glory, a chance to maneuver instead of frontal grinding. Bradley empathized deeply, knowing leadership sometimes meant accepting blame upward while shielding subordinates from political crossfire during tense Allied command debates that summer alone endured. He resisted despair, believing solutions existed if command alignment shifted and initiative returned. Patton's Third Army loomed as potential release, promising movement and shock. Bradley waited, balancing urgency against obedience, hoping higher command would unlock the battlefield before his force collapsed under relentless Normandy's summer pressures and casualties mounting daily. Strategic patience demanded sacrifice, yet Bradley questioned proportionality when sacrifice fell unevenly. His army paid while explanations circulated elsewhere. Such imbalance threatened trust within alliance ranks, an intangible asset vital as ammunition. eroding quietly with every delayed decision and every unrewarded assault during Normandy operations. Summer of attrition warfare continued. Bradley's dilemma defined Normandy's middle weeks, an army bleeding without maneuver while strategy stalled. Responsibility weighed heavily, yet resolve endured. He would preserve combat power, endure frustration, and prepare for breakout. Trusting adaptability and leadership, could eventually reclaim initiative from the hedgerows despite mounting losses, delays, and strategic uncertainty prevailing. Operation Cobra began beneath the thunder of Allied bombers, shattering German lines west of St. Lay with unprecedented force. Patton's doctrine finally met suitable terrain, as firepower cleared corridors where movement mattered. The hedgerow prison cracked open, releasing American units primed for speed, aggression, and long-delayed maneuver across Normandy's battered countryside. The bombing was imperfect, tragically costly to some American units, yet operationally decisive. German command cohesion fractured under shock and dust. Defensive belts dissolved into isolated pockets, unable to coordinate resistance. For Bradley's army, the moment represented escape from attrition into possibility, trading suffocation for momentum at last within western Normandy. Patton entered the field like compressed energy suddenly released, driving formations through gaps without hesitation. Orders emphasized advance over consolidation, pursuit over caution. Tanks rolled past stunned defenders, bypassing strongpoints rather than grinding them down. The contrast with previous weeks was immediate, visible in miles gained within hours. German infantry reeled, lacking reserves to seal breaches created by Cobra's blow. Commanders attempted counterattacks piecemeal, but mobility favored Americans now. Patton's columns flowed around resistance, leaving mopping up to follow-on units. The battlefield transformed from static hellscape into fluid contest shaped by speed and initiative. For soldiers who had survived the bocage, the change felt unreal. Open fields replaced earthen walls, horizons expanded, and fear shifted from invisible ambush to exposed pursuit. Morale surged with movement itself, confirming doctrine that maneuver preserved lives better than frontal persistence under constrained conditions that had dominated June and early July. Patton exploited confusion relentlessly, driving toward Avranches to secure the gateway into Brittany. Logistics strained to keep pace, yet urgency overrode comfort. Fuel convoys raced forward, commanders accepted risk knowingly. Momentum became protection, denying Germans time to regroup or establish coherent defensive lines across France's western approaches. German high command reacted too late, misjudging scale and intent of the breakout. Orders conflicted, reserves misallocated, and command paralysis spread. What Montgomery had fixed in place unintentionally, Patton now shattered deliberately. The strategic balance shifted decisively, as German armor failed to concentrate against rapidly dispersing American thrusts. Bradley watched transformation with vindication, tempered by memory of losses endured. Cobra confirmed what his soldiers had paid to learn, that maneuver was salvation. The First Army's suffering bought time, but it was movement that redeemed sacrifice, turning endurance into operational success once terrain and command aligned. The escape from Normandy unfolded rapidly, roads choked with retreating German units and abandoned equipment. Air power hunted columns relentlessly, compounding chaos. Patton pressed harder, believing collapse contagious if pursued without pause. His instincts proved correct, as resistance crumbled under pressure applied everywhere simultaneously. Allied coordination improved as success validated aggressive doctrine. Skepticism faded before results measured in territory seized and enemy destroyed. Cobra became more than an operation. It symbolized liberation from strategic paralysis. The campaign regained purpose, restoring confidence shaken by weeks of costly stagnation within the hedgerows. For American soldiers, Cobra meant survival as much as victory. Movement reduced exposure, initiative restored dignity, and leadership aligned with lived experience. The battlefield finally rewarded courage with progress, affirming belief that sacrifice had meaning beyond endurance, pointing toward eventual triumph rather than endless suffering. Patton's unleashed advance closed Normandy's darkest chapter, transforming hell into highway. The war accelerated, momentum returned, and Allied strategy regained coherence. What began as desperate escape became relentless pursuit, proving that speed, when finally permitted, could save lives and reshape history after weeks trapped in blood-soaked fields. The aftermath of Normandy's bocage revealed a stark truth. D-Day's initial success could have unraveled without decisive action. And American forces paid dearly for British delays at Caen and Caen. Every mile gained afterward carried a human cost measured in blood, sweat, and exhaustion, yet also in lessons learned that shaped the final push toward liberation of France. Bradley understood the stakes. Every hedgerow held men immobilized, tanks exposed, and morale fragile. American divisions had suffered more than 40,000 casualties by mid-July, a price exacted not solely by German resistance, but by stalled British advances that allowed panzers to concentrate against the First Army, transforming initial victory into grinding attrition that threatened to stall the entire campaign. Patton's eventual breakthrough via Operation Cobra symbolized salvation, but it also underscored that every day of delay had consequences. Soldiers' lives had been risked, many lost, because Montgomery's cautious approach failed to exploit the open terrain promised on D-Day. The cost of hesitation was counted in men, materiel, and strategic opportunity that might have shortened the war. The American survival and eventual success depended on leadership willing to act with audacity. Patton's doctrine of rapid exploitation and maneuver proved decisive where cautious planning failed, converting static hedgerows into open corridors. The contrast between initiative and delay highlighted the interplay of personal reputation, command decisions, and battlefield outcomes in determining both operational and historical consequences. Montgomery's reputation remained politically intact, yet operationally compromised. Eisenhower tolerated the delays to preserve alliance cohesion, but the First Army's suffering could not be erased. Bradley's forces endured a brutal calculus where heroism, endurance, and tragedy intersected, proving that promises of speed on D-Day were not abstract, they were essential for minimizing casualties and maintaining momentum toward Paris. The hedgerow campaign demonstrated that victory after D-Day was fragile, contingent, and dependent on adaptability. American forces adapted, learning to navigate constrained terrain under constant threat, while commanders recalibrated strategy in real time. Patton's interventions showed that decisive action could overcome prior failures, but the legacy of delay remained visible in shattered units and exhausted men who endured relentless fighting. Each day of stasis reinforced the critical role of timing. Montgomery's failures were measured in incremental losses and slow progress, while Patton's breakthrough illustrated that decisive, aggressive leadership could reshape outcomes. Normandy's liberation was secured not by promises kept, but by rapid exploitation of opportunity, courage, and calculated risk under intense operational pressure that few could tolerate. The cost to American morale was equally profound. Men saw comrades fall while British forces stalled nearby, creating resentment, frustration, and a sense of being sacrificed for strategic miscalculations. Patton's eventual advance restored confidence, but the memory of avoidable suffering lingered, illustrating the human consequences of delayed action and mismanaged strategic priorities in a multinational campaign. Logistics, artillery, and infantry coordination were tested to extremes. Supplies had to be rushed forward through wrecked roads and congested routes, while units recovering from attrition struggled to maintain cohesion. Patton's ability to synchronize these elements under pressure exemplified how leadership, operational tempo, and risk tolerance could convert strategic jeopardy into tangible victories, saving the campaign from potential collapse. In hindsight, D-Day's success was inseparable from the weeks that followed. Strategic promises of rapid advance, broken at Caen and Caen, highlighted the fragility of coalition warfare and the dependence of operational success on execution. Patton's interventions restored initiative, proving that reputations and lives alike were inseparable from timely, aggressive command that confronted both terrain and enemy decisively.